Why was the parade ground so silent, as if every man present was waiting for her to fail before she had even spoken? The transport doors hissed open, metal groaning against the Texas heat. Lieutenant Mackenzie, Mack, Reynolds stepped down into a storm of dust and silence. Her boots struck gravel with the weight of someone who had walked in places far harsher than this. The winds carried whispers, the kind of whispers she'd heard before, always the same when the only woman walked into a space built to break men. 180 soldiers in formation, and not one of them looked ready to welcome her. She didn't care, she wasn't there to be welcomed. Orders had sent her and orders she obeyed, but that didn't silence the muttering. Diversity hire, someone scoffed. Bet she won't last a week, another added, his voice loud enough for her to hear. Most of them looked at her like an intruder. A handful, though, studied her carefully, not with mockery but with something colder, curiosity. She walked past without a word. Inside the command building, the air cooled but grew heavier. Colonel William Harrove, rigid as stone, entered with the weight of war's past etched across his face. His file said Vietnam, his ribbons confirmed it, but it was his eyes that told the story, sharp, sunken, always scanning for weakness. He looked at her only long enough to harden his voice. "You're Lieutenant Reynolds." "Yes, sir." "Your orders come from up top. You'll be evaluated in 3 weeks. Until then, you'll run with 2nd Platoon. Dismissed." No handshake, no welcome, just dismissal. Max saluted and left. She had faced colder receptions before, but this one felt designed to test her patience. Her barracks lay at the edge of the row, isolated, of course. A steel bed, a battered locker, 4 bare walls. She unpacked in silence. Uniforms, boots, a worn copy of The Art of War, and one framed photo. A younger Mack beside her father, Colonel James Reynolds, his eagles gleaming, his stare as hard as the man he had been. The tattoo beneath her shoulder blade burned faintly when she looked at the picture, as it always did when she thought of him. No one here would see it. Not yet. Morning arrived at 4:30, merciless as always. Mack joined the formation for the 5-mile run. She stayed in the middle at first, steady and unreadable. By mile 3, soldiers dropped pace. By mile 4, she was moving forward. When they finished, she had outrun more than half without strain. Sergeant Jackson Miller, broad and muscular, eyed her sharply. "Not showing off, are you, Lieutenant?" "No, Sergeant, just keeping pace." But Miller wasn't convinced, and neither were the whispers that followed her across the field. The firing range was worse. She didn't just hit targets. She dissected them, every shot precise, every movement efficient. Soldiers exchanged glances. This wasn't beginner's luck. At gear drills, she stripped and rebuilt her rifle faster than the instructors. By the end of the week, whispers turned to grudging respect from some, resentment from others. Miller barked at her during a maneuver. "You ever going to stop showing off, Reynolds?" She met his glare without flinching. "Not showing off, Sergeant, just doing my job." The chuckles from the men stung his pride. His resentment grew. Colonel Harrove never spoke. He simply stood at the edge of drills with arms crossed, aviators reflecting the merciless sun, his silence heavier than any lecture. He was watching, measuring, waiting. Then came Friday. An unexpected announcement crackled over the loudspeakers. "All personnel, full uniform inspection, parade ground, 1600 hours, mandatory." Unusual. Inspections weren't held without notice, and never in the sweltering heat of late afternoon. The soldiers grumbled as they lined up. Mack stood at the front, directly in Harrove's line of sight. The air felt different, thick, tense, anticipatory. Harrove walked the line slowly, inspecting boots, name tapes, collars. Minor corrections here and there. Nothing unusual until he reached Mack. He stopped. His voice carried sharp undertones. "Lieutenant Reynolds, step forward." She did, posture perfect. "You've had an eventful first week," he said flatly. "Yes, sir." "Let's see if you understand regulation." His eyes hardened. "Remove your blouse." The yard froze. Soldiers shifted, eyes snapping toward her. The silence was suffocating. Mack blinked once, stunned, but her face gave nothing away. "Sorry." "You heard me. Regulation calls for layered uniform presentation. Remove it." She knew exactly what this was. Not inspection, not discipline, humiliation. He wanted her broken in front of every man. Her rage burned hot, but her hand stayed steady. Slowly, deliberately, she undid one button, then another, then another. The whispers started like sparks in dry grass, but no one laughed. She folded the blouse neatly over her arm and stood at attention in her olive undershirt. Rank visible, posture perfect, head high. And then it happened. The colonel's words caught in his throat. His face stiffened. Because just beneath her sleeve a tattoo was visible, dark ink against tan skin, an eagle in a battle dive, arrows clutched in talons, encircled by a coded series of numbers. A mark that did not belong in the open. The whispers changed. "Wait, is that? That's the mark of Nighthawk." Harrove took a step closer. For the first time since she'd arrived, his composure faltered. His lips parted, then closed again. His face, pale now, betrayed something no soldier had ever seen in him before. "Fear." He snapped his gaze to the rest of the unit. Inspection dismissed. Confusion rippled through the ranks. No one moved. He raised his voice. "You're all dismissed. Return to your assignments." The formation broke, but not naturally. Soldiers whispered, stole glances at Mack, stiffened when her eyes met theirs. The men who had mocked her now shifted uneasily, caught between disbelief and awe. Harrove turned sharply. "Reynolds with me." She followed without hesitation. Inside his office the fan buzzed. Papers rustled. The colonel removed his glasses, sat behind his desk, and studied her as though seeing her for the first time. "You weren't supposed to be here," he said finally. "I was assigned here." "By who?" "You know I can't say." His gaze dropped to the tattoo hidden again beneath her sleeve. "And that?" "Learned." For a long time neither spoke. Then he exhaled, almost a growl. "I've read about Nighthawk. I know enough. You could have said something." "You didn't ask." Harrove's jaw tightened. He leaned back, folding his arms. "Do you know what kind of storm you've stirred up?" She met his stare, calm, unblinking. "I didn't stir it, you did." For a moment, silence held the room like a vice. And in that silence, something shifted, not approval, not warmth, but the faintest flicker of respect. The kind a man gives when he realizes the ground beneath him has changed forever. Outside, the whispers spread like wildfire. And Mack Reynolds, the woman they had mocked, the anomaly they expected to fail, walked past them in silence. No explanation, no excuses, no surrender. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did silence follow her everywhere now? Was it respect, or was it fear? 2 days had passed since the inspection. 2 days since her tattoo had caught the colonel's eyes and frozen the parade ground. And in those 2 days, the air at Fort Hawkins had shifted in ways words could barely describe. No more smirks when she walked by. No more crude mutters. The chalk scrawled across her door, "She won't last," was scrubbed clean before she ever saw who did it. The same men who once dismissed her now kept their distance. Some looked away. Others offered quiet nods they hadn't dared before. But silence carries weight, and hers carried heavier than orders. Sergeant Miller noticed it most. The bark in his voice softened. He still pushed her in drills, but the venom was gone, replaced by something sharper: watchfulness. He wasn't mocking her anymore. He was studying her, waiting for cracks. Colonel Harrove, though, he had changed in a different way. He didn't call her out in front of the men. He didn't even look at her the same way. His eyes lingered longer, not with ridicule but calculation, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't afford to misjudge. He had seen something that day on her shoulder, something that shook him in a way his men had never seen. The whispers kept the fire alive. Nighthawk doesn't exist. Then why does she have the mark? Maybe it's fake. Master Sergeant Thompson says it's real. That name, Thompson, was one she hadn't heard until the second inspection. It was late in the evening, the twilight heavy with heat. Another full unit assembly was called. Odd timing, odd purpose. Soldiers grumbled but lined up again, sweating in their class A uniforms. Mack stood centered, her boots polished to a mirror shine. Colonel Harrow's voice cut across the parade ground. This unit has long stood on discipline, on order, on example, and no soldier is exempt from review. He paced with rhythm, the words deliberate. The men stiffened. They knew what was coming. He turned, his eyes locking onto Mack. Step forward, Lieutenant Reynolds. She did, chin high, body rigid. This soldier, Harrow continued, removed her blouse earlier this week for uniform verification. While some of you may believe in stories or inked fairy tales, I care about regulation. We correct everyone, publicly, if needed. The air turned electric. This wasn't just a test, it was provocation. He wanted her to crack, to refuse, to disobey. Again, he ordered, voice low but sharp, remove your blouse. A ripple of disbelief moved through the men. This wasn't regulation. It wasn't tradition. It was war between a commander and one lieutenant. Her jaw tightened, but her hands were steady. Slowly, she unbuttoned her blouse again, folded it, and stood in her undershirt. Her tattoo burned under the fatting sun, impossible to ignore. This time no one whispered, no one dared. Harrow stepped closer, pointing like the ink itself was an offense. She wears a mark not listed in her file, a mark tied to a program that officially does not exist. From the back ranks, a gravel-thick voice answered. It exists. Every head turned. Master Sergeant Frank Thompson, the oldest man on the base, stepped forward. Vietnam veteran, leathered skin, eyes that had seen too many wars, and on his own arm, just visible beneath a rolled sleeve, the faded lines of the same eagle. I saw that ink in '93, Mogadishu. Men died that day. One of them wore that bird. They got us out anyway. She didn't steal that ink. The formation erupted in whispers, disbelief, awe. Harrow's composure slipped for the briefest second. He muttered, dismissed. But the damage was done. As Mack refastened her blouse, the eyes on her had changed forever. Not mocking now, not even cautious, something heavier, recognition, fear, and for some, respect. That night in her barracks, Mack lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt exposed. The tattoo was never meant to surface here, not in front of 180 men, not under the harsh light of suspicion. But now it was out. And once a secret is out, it can't be pulled back into shadow. By morning, the whole base buzzed. Mack's tattoo wasn't debated anymore. It was confirmed. Thompson's voice had silenced doubts more effectively than anything she could have said. The soldiers whispered instead about what it meant. At the mess hall, she walked in. A group of men fell silent. One muttered, she probably got it in a biker shop. The others chuckled nervously. She ignored them, sat alone, ate in silence. But she felt the eyes on her, every fork lifted slower, every tray set down with caution. Sergeant Miller passed her on the way out. For the first time, he didn't say anything, just nodded, stiff, respectful, uneasy. Later that day, Harrow summoned her. His office blinds were drawn. The desk was neat, almost obsessively so. He gestured for her to close the door. I've been on the phone all night, he began, not looking up. I reached out to some old names, checked some records. There's no documentation of you in Nighthawk. Nothing. That's how it works, Mack replied, calm, even. He finally looked up. His eyes weren't hard this time. They were searching. And you're telling me you ran operations so black, even top brass can't trace you. I'm not telling you anything, because I'm not supposed to. The silence between them was long, heavy. The fan overhead rattled. Finally, Harrow spoke again. "You think I tried to humiliate you? I didn't. I wanted to test your discipline." "No," Mack answered. "You tested something else." For a moment something flickered in his eyes. Not kindness, not regret, something harder to admit, respect. "You think I'm afraid of you?" he asked, almost a growl. "No," she said quietly, "but you're afraid of what I represent." He didn't argue. When she left his office, the sun was setting. Soldiers moved across the grounds in shadows. Some avoided her, some nodded, some stared too long. The air had shifted permanently. And Mack knew the truth. Once silence begins to carry your name, it never leaves. Why did the colonel call another full assembly? Was it discipline, or was it theater? The order came sudden. 1800 hours, parade ground, full dress. Every soldier knew it wasn't routine. Inspections weren't stacked this close together. Mack felt the weight of it the moment she stepped into formation, the air thick with the smell of polished leather and Texas dust. The soldiers stood in rows, boots gleaming, uniforms stiff. She stood in the second row, dead center, her cap angled perfectly, her collar tabs aligned. She didn't need to look to know whose eyes were on her. Colonel Harrow walked out with the rhythm of a man who wanted every step to echo. Clipboard in hand, voice cutting across the evening heat. "This unit has long stood on discipline, on order, on example. But standards are not optional, and they will not be bent." The men stood stiff, but their eyes slid toward Mack. They knew where this was heading. "Some soldiers arrive with unusual backgrounds," Harrow continued, his tone like steel dragged across stone. "They may think themselves exempt from review. They may think themselves untouchable. But in this unit, no one is above regulation." He turned sharply, his eyes locking on her. "Lieutenant Reynolds, step forward." She did, posture perfect, chin lifted. This is the same soldier who removed her blouse earlier this week, and tonight she will do it again. Gasps rippled through the formation. He was daring her, pushing her, hopping she'd refuse, hopping she'd break. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't move until she was ready. Then, without hesitation, she undid the buttons, folded her blouse, and stood in her undershirt, her tattoo burning visible in the dying light. The silence was absolute. Harrow's voice was louder now, forcing authority into the void. "She wears a mark not listed in her file, a mark associated with a program that does not exist. And then, it exists." The words cut through the stillness like a blade. Master Sergeant Thompson stepped forward from the back ranks. His sleeve slid just enough to reveal the faded lines of the same eagle. His voice, cracked but strong, carried across the yard. "I saw that ink in '93, Mogadishu, 7 men down before the evac. One of them wore that bird. We all walked out because of him. That tattoo isn't decoration. It's blood-earned. She didn't steal it." The formation stirred. Soldiers shifted uneasily, some staring at Mack, some at Thompson, some at the colonel himself. For once Harrow had no words. His jaw tightened, his clipboard lowered. "Dismissed," he snapped. But dismissal didn't erase what had been said. The damage, or the truth, was permanent. That night Mack sat on her bunk in the quiet. The barracks had emptied, but silence weighed heavier than company. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't wanted her past to surface here, to hang in the air like a shadow over every step she took. But now it was out, and once a secret breathes, it can never be buried again. The next days passed like a storm moving under the surface. Soldiers no longer mocked, they whispered. Some avoided her, others nodded, stiff and quiet. The base itself seemed to shift around her. The chalk insults disappeared. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Even Sergeant Miller, the one who had been loudest in his doubt, kept his voice even now. Not respectful, not hostile, something in between, watching her with caution, as if waiting to see whether she lived up to the ink on her shoulder. Then came the journalist. Marcus Wells arrived on base like a shadow in daylight, carrying a press credential and a smile too polished to be real. He claimed he was writing a feature on elite training units. He asked casual questions, too casual, about drills, about instructors, about soldiers who had served elsewhere. His eyes lingered on Mack more than once. She ignored him at first. But shadows don't leave when ignored. That night, as she walked past the motor pool, he stepped from behind a Humvee. "Lieutenant Reynolds," he said smoothly, "a moment of your time." She stopped, her face unreadable. "I've heard some remarkable stories," he continued. "Some even say you were part of—" "I was never part of anything," she cut him off sharply. "Nothing worth printing." His smile didn't falter. "That's exactly what makes it worth printing." She turned without another word. "Good night, Mr. Wells." But when she walked away, her mind raced. Because the danger wasn't what he might print about her. The danger was who else might be listening. The program she carried wasn't hers to expose. Others still lived in the shadows, still fought battles no one would ever know. If their names surfaced, if their lives were dragged into daylight, what she carried wouldn't just be ink. It would be a target. 2 days later, during a combat simulation, everything sharpened. Miller's team led the assault, Mack assigned as second. When the route collapsed, when the fire pressed in too tight, Miller froze. Mack didn't. She restructured the team in seconds, rerouted them through a blind ridge, flanked the enemy position, and secured the hostages in under 7 minutes. The observers erupted in applause. Miller didn't say a word. When she walked off the field, sweat streaking down her face, dirt in her hair, a few soldiers clapped her back. Others just stared. No one doubted anymore. That night, someone pinned a note to her locker. "We believe you earned it, but now prove to us why they feared it." She didn't smile, but her fingers brushed the edge of her tattoo, the ink that had become both shield and curse. By the end of the week, the base had stopped pretending. Mack Reynolds wasn't just another officer anymore. She had become a legend in whispers, a story retold in barracks and over rations. Not everyone admired her, not everyone trusted her, but no one ignored her. And then another summons from Harrove. His tone clipped, but different this time. When she entered, he looked older, lines etched deeper into his face. His desk was spotless as ever, but one folder sat at the center. "I've been digging," he said. "Your file's nothing but redactions, years erased. I called Intel Group 7, asked about Nighthawk. They hung up after 5 seconds. "That sounds about right," Mack replied evenly. His eyes searched hers. "What happened to you out there?" "You don't want to know." "You're damn right I don't, but I need to." She reached into her pouch, pulled out a sealed envelope and placed it on his desk. Authorization code, one-use access, from General Montgomery. His brows lifted. He opened it, typed the code into his secure terminal, and for 10 minutes he read. His face paled with each page. Syria, Venezuela, silent extractions, missions erased from history, ratios no one should have survived, and at the bottom of one file a code name. Stormbird. He looked at her, almost whispering, "That's you." She nodded once. His hand trembled when he set the file down. "Why the hell are you here? You should be leading Black Ops, not babysitting trainees." "I asked to come here," Mack said simply. He blinked. "Why?" "Because this is where the next leaders are made, and I want to see if any of them are worth it." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Not hostile, not uneasy, just silence thick with the weight of understanding. Harrove leaned back, his voice lower now. "You could have let the rumor fade. Instead, you stood your ground." "They needed to see it, not for me, for them." And for the first time since she had arrived, Harrove looked at her not as an anomaly, not as a problem, but as something else. An equal. But outside, the whispers weren't fading. They were spreading. And somewhere beyond Fort Hawkins, someone else was listening. Someone who had been waiting for her name. Why was a reporter asking questions? no civilian could possibly know. The week stretched heavy, every hour pulsing with tension that words couldn't explain. Fort Hawkins wasn't the same place it had been when Mack stepped off the transport. Soldiers who once laughed now straightened when she walked past. The chalk marks on her door were gone. Even Miller, once loud and mocking, kept his tone clipped, cautious. It wasn't trust, it wasn't respect, it was something colder, something that kept soldiers awake at night, fear of what she carried, fear of the ink under her sleeve. But fear doesn't last. It curdles into curiosity, and curiosity has a way of dragging shadows into light. Marcus Wells was still on base. His smile didn't fade. His questions never stopped. He asked about Nighthawk too easily, dropped code names too specific, names of operations that had never made the evening news. One night, he cornered her near the motor pool again. "I think you have a story, Lieutenant Reynolds." She didn't break stride. "You think wrong." "B grade," he said behind her. 2004, Embassy Extraction. She stopped cold. No one should have known that word. Slowly she turned, her face unreadable but her eyes sharp as glass. "Who are you really?" He smiled thinly. "Someone who believes the American people deserve to know what's being done in their name, even if it costs good people their secrets." Before she could answer, Harrov appeared with 2 MPs. His voice was steel. "Mr. Wells, your credentials are revoked. You'll be escorted off base." Wells didn't resist. As he passed Mack, he leaned close enough for her alone to hear. "This isn't over, Storm." Her blood ran cold. He had used her code name, one that was never written, one spoken only inside black walls and secure comms. No journalist could have known it. That night Harrov called her and Master Sergeant Thompson into his office. The blinds were shut, the fan buzzing, a single lamp throwing long shadows across the walls. He didn't waste time. "Wells isn't a journalist. He's ex-CIA, discharged in 2008, reason classified." Mack's voice was low. "Then why is he here?" Thompson leaned forward, the scars on his arms catching the light. "He's asking questions about things no reporter would know to ask. Operation Shadowstep, Blackwater Junction." Mack's eyes flickered. Shadowstep had been buried deeper than any file should go. Blackwater Junction even deeper. "He's not digging for a story," Harrov said grimly. "He's digging for names, methods, people." And then Harrov slid a photograph across the desk. A man with a broken nose, scar above his left eye, the kind of face that carved itself into memory. Her heart stopped. Alexander Kovac. Thompson looked between them. "Who the hell is he?" "Serbian intelligence," Harrov explained. "Specialized in counterops against Western special forces." Mack's voice was flat, controlled, but her hands tightened on the desk. "I crossed paths with him, at B grade." Harrov's eyes darkened. He didn't walk away happy, and now he's working with Wells. Thompson shook his head slowly. "A ghost hunting ghosts." But Kovac wasn't just hunting, he was stalking. The next morning, Mack discovered how deep it went. During a review of base schematics, she spotted something wrong. A section of the old administration building didn't line up with the rest of the blueprints, twice the size it should have been. "Colonel," she said, spreading the maps across his desk, "what's this?" Harrov frowned. "Storage, sealed decades ago." "Then why does it still take power?" That night, with Thompson and Harrov at her side, Mack unlocked the sealed wing. Dust lay thick on the floor. The air smelled of paper and rust. Flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating typewriters left mid-sentence, calendars frozen in June 1972. "This place hasn't been touched in 50 years, Thompson muttered. But Mack knelt, brushing dust from faint footprints, fresh, weeks old at most. At the end of the corridor, a heavy door waited, not rusted, not old. Its titanium lock gleamed with maintenance far newer than the rest. "Someone been keeping this alive," Mack whispered. She pulled a small kit from her pocket. Minutes later, the lock clicked. The door groaned open. Inside was a room built for secrets. Filing cabinets lined the walls. A single desk sat in the middle, papers scattered like ghosts of wars long buried. On the wall, a faded emblem, an eagle clutching arrows surrounded by 13 stars. Thompson exhaled, almost reverent. Shadow Hunters, Vietnam-era special ops, the prototype for Nighthawk. They dug through what files they could. Operations names: Black Echo, Silent Step, Continuity. And then Mack's light caught something that stopped her cold. A folder marked Legacy. Inside was a list of program code names stretching across decades. Shadow Hunters, Black Echo, Silent Step, Nighthawk, connected not by time but by purpose. They're not separate programs, she realized. They're one lineage, different eras, same mission. Harrove held up a photograph, edges yellowed. A group of men standing in front of a hangar. Faces blurred, uniforms stripped of insignia. But on one shoulder, just visible in grainy black and white, an eagle tattoo. "This goes back further than any of us knew," he said quietly. Thompson's jaw tightened. "And someone else knows about this room, someone who's been here recently." They found the proof under the desk, a black box. Inside, a modern satellite phone and a notebook, surveillance notes. The last entry dated 3 days ago. Mack's hand closed around it. "Wells, he's been using this as a blind." "Not just him," Harrove said, flipping through the pages. "Look, multiple observers, rotations, they've been watching us." Thompson's voice was gravel. "Why? What's so important about Fort Hawkins?" The answer hit Mack like a stone. "It's not the base, it's the legacy. These programs aren't just connected by purpose. They're connected by people, mentors, trainees, families. Kovac's not hunting history, he's hunting us." The room fell silent. The air felt heavier than smoke. Harrove shut the file, his jaw tight. "We keep this between us, no one else, not yet." But keeping it quiet didn't change the truth. Kovac was closer than any of them wanted to believe. The next morning, Mack stood before Charlie Company. She didn't tell them everything. She couldn't, but she told them enough. "We're running new drills," she said. "Real-world security. This isn't for grades, this is for keeps." Miller stood beside her, arms crossed, his voice steady. "You heard the lieutenant. This isn't a game anymore." The soldiers exchanged glances, some nervous, some eager, but no one walked away. And as Mack divided them into security teams, as she taught them counter-surveillance, rotation watches, infiltration defense, she realized something. They weren't just following her anymore. They were preparing to defend her. And somewhere beyond the fences, Kovac was preparing too. Why were the motion sensors tripping when no one was near the perimeter? It was just after 200. The night was still, broken only by the buzz of insects and the hum of the distant highway. Most of Fort Hawkins slept, but the base never truly rested. Guard rotations cycled steady. Security cameras swept their arcs. Dogs paced the fences. But then the alerts began. Small ones. First on the east fence, motion detected but nothing visible. Then on the north side, anomalies in the feed as if the cameras blinked at the wrong second. By the third alert, the duty officer called Colonel Harrove. By the fourth, Mack was already awake, boots laced, rifle slung. She didn't wait for orders, she moved. The base stirred around her. Lights flicked on. Men hurried to posts, some bleary-eyed, others sharp with adrenaline. Sergeant Miller met her at the motor pool, his jaw tight. "You seeing this?" "I see it," she answered. "This isn't random, they're testing us." And then, almost as if the night heard her, the power died. Total blackout. For 3 long seconds the base fell into silence and shadow. No hum of lights, no sweep of cameras, just darkness. Then the emergency generators kicked in. Red floodlights bathed the grounds, casting everything in blood-colored glow. Sirens wailed. Harrove's voice cracked through the loudspeakers. Lockdown protocol, full perimeter sweep, all squads mobilize. Chaos moved like a tide, soldiers sprinted to posts, weapons unlocked, radios crackled. Mack led second platoon toward the east fence where the first alerts had sounded. The red lights threw their shadows long against the dirt. Every tree looked like a threat. Every bush, a silhouette waiting to move. "Eyes up," she whispered. "Breathe steady, don't chase ghosts." But ghosts had already entered. At the fence line they found it. A section cut, clean and silent. Whoever had come through hadn't left it sloppy. They'd sealed it with adhesive tape that matched the wire's color. It would have taken weeks to notice, unless you were looking for it. Miller knelt, running his hand along the metal. Professional work. This wasn't kids with wire cutters. "No," Mack said, scanning the tree line beyond. This was Kavak. Her men shifted nervously at the name. They didn't know the details. They didn't need to. The weight in her voice was enough. The first shot cracked through the night. Not a wild one. Precise. A guard on Tower 3 slumped, falling against the rail, dead before his rifle hit the ground. The men scattered for cover, training snapping into instinct. Mack dropped flat, scanning the tree line through her scope. Nothing. Just shifting shadows. Whoever fired was already moving. "Report," Harrow's voice barked over radio. "One casualty, Tower 3, Mack answered. "East perimeter breach confirmed. Multiple unknowns inside." The colonel's reply came cold. "Contain it. Do not let them reach Central Command." "Copy." Mack gestured sharply. Miller's fire team peeled right, hers left. They swept through brush and dirt, hearts hammering, every sense sharpened. And then they found it. A body, not one of theirs. Black-clad, masked, gear stripped of insignia, a suppressed rifle at his side, dead from a single round to the chest. Miller frowned. Who the hell killed him? Before Mack could answer, a second body fell from the shadows above them. Same gear, same mask, but this one hadn't been shot. His throat was cut, clean. Her pulse spiked. They're not just here to hit us, they're cleaning their own trail. That's when the base erupted. Explosions shook the motor pool. Flames rose where fuel reserves had been hit. Soldiers shouted over radios. Chaos split into fragments. Mack forced calm into her voice. "Miller, get your men on suppression. I want eyes west, now." He didn't argue, he moved. She pulled 2 privates with her, sweeping deeper east. The ground sloped toward a drainage ditch, and in that ditch footprints, dozens. "They brought a team," one private whispered. "Not a team," Mack corrected, "a platoon." Her gut twisted. This wasn't a probing attack, it was a message. Kavak wasn't testing defenses, he was announcing himself. Back at command, Harrov was barking orders, maps spread across the table, radios blaring. Thompson leaned over him, steady as stone. "They're not here for supplies," Thompson growled. "They're here for her." Harrov didn't argue. He didn't need to. The way the infiltrators moved, the precision of their entry, the angles of their fire, it wasn't about sabotage. It was about dragging Mack Reynolds into the open. And it was working. By 300, fires burned across the motor pool. 3 men were down, 2 critical. The infiltrators were ghosts, striking and vanishing, leaving confusion in their wake. Mack regrouped with Miller near the west barracks. His face was streaked with soot, his voice tight. "We've contained the fires, but they're moving inside the wire faster than we can track." "Then stop tracking," Mack said. "Start funneling. We control their lanes, force them where we want them." He stared at her, then nodded. No argument. They worked fast, redirecting patrols, tightening defenses, sealing corridors. By 3:30, the infiltrators had fewer options. By 3:45, they were trapped between the training yard and the storage hangars. And that's when Kavak made his move. From the rooftop of the hangar, his voice carried an accented English, low and mocking. "You hide well, Stormbird, but you can't hide forever." Her men froze. Some looked at her in shock. Stormbird, the name they weren't supposed to know. Mack raised her rifle, scanning the rooftop. Her voice cut sharp. "You shouldn't have come here, Kovac." His laugh echoed in the night. "I've been hunting your kind since Sarajevo, always shadows, always whispers, but you," he gestured with his rifle, "you walk in daylight, you wear your ghost on your skin, and that is why you will fall." Shots cracked from the roof. Her men dove for cover. Mack returned fire, controlled bursts, forcing him back. But he didn't stay. He vanished into the smoke like he'd never been there at all. By 500, the base was secure. The infiltrators, those who hadn't fled, lay dead or captured. Their gear was clean. No serials, no papers, no names. Ghost soldiers erased before they were even sent. The fires were out, the dead carried away, but the silence left behind was heavier than the smoke. At sunrise, Harov gathered the unit. His face was hard, voice like iron. "We've been hit, we lost men, but we held, and we will hold again." His words rang across the yard, but the soldiers' eyes drifted to Mack. She hadn't spoken to them. She hadn't needed to. They'd seen her move through fire, seen her steady when others broke. And though no one said it out loud, they knew the truth. The attack wasn't on Fort Hawkins, it was on her. That night, alone in her barracks, Mack sat on the edge of her bunk. Her hands trembled once briefly before she clenched them tight. The tattoo burned under her sleeve. Kovac wasn't finished, he'd only just begun. And the next time it wouldn't be a message, it would be war. Why were the soldiers whispering more now than after the attack itself? Fort Hawkins had survived the night, but survival isn't victory. Fires had been put out, fences repaired, barracks swept clean of ash, but the damage wasn't in the structures. It was in the eyes of the men. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't mocking, but they weren't steady either. Every shadow looked like an intruder. Every flicker of light looked like a scope's reflection. Fear had settled into the base like smoke that wouldn't clear. Kovac hadn't taken the fort. He had taken their certainty. Sergeant Miller tried to hold them together. His voice was sharper now, his discipline harsher. But Mack saw the cracks. Men second-guessing orders, fingers twitching near triggers, eyes darting at night toward the fence line, waiting for ghosts. Mack didn't blame them. She knew the weight of being hunted. She lived it before. She bore its mark on her skin, and now they bore it too. But Kovac didn't strike again. Not yet. He let silence work for him. Silence and fear. By the second week, strange things started happening. The loudspeakers blared at 300 with distorted voices, orders in English, then Serbian, then silence. No one could trace the source. Files went missing from locked cabinets. Radios picked up faint signals, conversations that didn't belong to anyone on their network. And then came the letters. Slipped under barrack doors, typed precise, no fingerprints. "Your lieutenant carries ghosts on her skin. How many of you will die for her past?" Some soldiers threw them away. Others kept them folded in their pockets, eyes haunted. The whispers grew, not about whether Mack was capable, not about whether she was trained, but about whether she was cursed. Miller confronted her after evening drills. His voice was low, rough with frustration. "They're losing it, Reynolds. They don't trust you. They think Kovac's here because of you." Her face was calm, but her voice carried a weight even he felt. "He is here because of me." Miller blinked. "Then why the hell are you even?" He stopped, shaking his head. "Forget it." But she didn't forget it. His words cut deeper than he knew. That night she sat on her bunk, staring at the photograph of her father, Colonel James Reynolds, the man whose shadow she'd carried her whole life. His voice echoed in her memory, stern and relentless. "Strength isn't in what you endure, Mackenzie. It's in what you protect." And that was the truth. She hadn't come to Fort Hawkins for reassignment. She hadn't come because of orders. She had asked for it, requested it, demanded it. Not to escape her past, but to face it. Because ghosts only win when you run. But she hadn't expected Kavak to follow this fast. She hadn't expected Wells to return either. It happened during a supply run 2 weeks after the infiltration. A convoy of trucks rolled through the checkpoint, dust plumbing in the Texas sun, and standing at the back of one, Marcus Wells, handcuffed, flanked by MPs. They dragged him into Harrow's office. He looked battered, face bruised, shirt torn, but his eyes were still sharp, still searching. Harrow's voice was cold. He was picked up outside San Antonio, tailing one of our supply officers. Wells chuckled weakly, tailoring the truth more like. Mack leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her voice cut low. "Why don't you stop pretending you're a journalist?" Wells looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, thin and bitter. "Because sometimes the story's the only cover you've got left." Thompson growled, "You fed Kavak intel." "I didn't feed him anything," Wells said quickly. "He doesn't need me for that. He's got people inside your systems, inside your command. I'm just the one who asks questions." "Questions like Stormbird," Mack said flatly. His smile faded. "Yeah," he whispered, "questions like that." Harrow slammed a hand on the desk. "Enough games. Who are you working for?" Wells didn't answer, not directly. He just looked at Mack. "You think he's coming for you, Reynolds? You think this is personal?" Her jaw tightened. "It is personal." Wells shook his head slowly. "No, it's bigger. He's not just hunting you. He's hunting what you represent, every program, every ghost. He's trying to erase the whole lineage. You're just the loudest proof it exists." The room went silent. Harrow's face darkened. Thompson's fists clenched. Mack's voice was calm, steady. "Then let him try." But later, alone in her barracks, her calm cracked. She stared at the tattoo in the mirror, tracing the ink with her fingers. Kavak wasn't wrong. Neither was Wells. She carried more than her past. She carried everyone's. Every name, every mission, every sacrifice buried under redactions. And Kavak wasn't trying to kill her. Not yet. He was trying to drag her into the light, to force her to expose the very thing she had sworn to protect. The pressure built. Soldiers looked at her differently now, some with loyalty, others with fear. Miller stood by her, but even he seemed torn, caught between respect and the voices of men who wondered if she was the reason they were under siege. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Miller approached her on the training yard. His voice was softer this time, almost human. "Why are you really here, Reynolds?" She didn't look at him, just watched the sky burn into dusk. "Because I got tired of running." He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. That night the whispers grew louder, not from soldiers, from the loudspeakers, from the radios. Kavak's voice distorted, echoing across the base. "You can't save them, Stormbird. They will die for your secrets. And when they do, their blood will mark your name." Some soldiers froze. Others shouted back at the speakers as if their rage could drown him out. But Mack stayed still, her eyes on the shadows just beyond the wire. Kavak wasn't striking with bullets this time. He didn't need to. He was striking with doubt. And doubt was harder to kill. Why did the night feel different, heavier, as if the ground itself was waiting for something to break? It had been 3 weeks since the first attack. 3 weeks of drills, sleepless nights, paranoia. Soldiers were thinner now, their faces worn by exhaustion, their nerves stretched to breaking. They followed orders, but they no longer laughed, no longer bantered. Every step felt like waiting for a trigger. And Mack felt it too. Even Miller, steady, blunt, dependable, had lost some of his edge. He snapped at men quicker now. He carried his rifle everywhere, even to the mess hall. Fear lived in his bones. But Kavak wasn't silent anymore. The loudspeakers crackled daily with his voice, distorted and mocking. "How many of you are ready to die for her? How many of you even know what she's hiding?" Letters appeared again, not typed this time, handwritten, slipped into lockers, into rucks. Words meant to splinter trust. "Stormbird isn't here to lead you, she's here to bury you." and some soldiers believed it. Harrove called Mack into his office late one night. His face was pale, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. "I've led men for 30 years," he said quietly. "I've never seen morale collapse like this." "They're not collapsing," Mack answered. "They're being targeted, Kovacs breaking them without firing a shot." Harrove's eyes searched hers. "Then stop him." But he didn't say how, and maybe he didn't know. The answer came the next night. At 100, the alarms wailed again, this time not on the fence line, inside the base. Miller was the first on scene, the communications building. Smoke poured from its windows, radios dead, screens blank. Whoever had hit it hadn't just sabotaged gear. They'd silenced their eyes and ears. Within minutes, infiltrators struck across the base, 3 teams, coordinated, precise. Explosions at the vehicle depot. Gunfire near the training yard. Shadows slipping through the chaos like knives in water. This wasn't harassment, this was war. Mack grabbed her rifle, sprinted through smoke and shouting. The air burned with fuel and fear. Soldiers fired blind, chasing ghosts they couldn't pin down. At the motor pool, she found Miller's squad pinned. Infiltrators on the rooftops rained controlled fire. Miller shouted orders, but panic spread through the ranks. Men broke cover one by one, cut down by suppressors before they reached safety. Mack slid beside him, her breath steady despite the chaos. "Pull them back, funnel their fire." "They won't move," Miller shouted over gunfire. "They think running means weakness." "Then make them move," she snapped. She didn't wait. She stood, firing 3 rapid bursts not at the rooftops but at the ground in front of her men. The sound jarred them, snapped their fear into focus. "Fall back on me." Her voice cut through the chaos. Some obeyed instantly. Others hesitated, then followed. Miller's voice joined hers, pulling them into formation. Together they regrouped behind the armored carriers. Their return fire tightened, focused. Within minutes, the rooftops were silent. 2 infiltrators lay dead. The rest slipped back into the dark. But it wasn't victory, not yet. Across the base, the fight raged. Explosions near the storage hangars, screams from the barracks. Kovacs' men moved like shadows, striking then vanishing. Mack led her squad toward the hangars, smoke stinging her eyes, heart steady in her chest. She pushed them harder, faster, her voice sharper than steel. Fear wasn't an option anymore. Fear was death. When they reached the hangars, they found the infiltrators planting charges. Mack didn't hesitate. She opened fire, her shots precise, measured. 2 men dropped. The rest scattered. Miller's squad surged forward, securing the area, disarming the charges. And then silence again. Too fast, too easy. That's when the lights went out. Total blackout. In the darkness, Kovacs' voice carried, calm, confident. "You fight well, Stormbird, but you can't fight forever." Her men froze, eyes wide, rifles shaking in their hands. Mack's jaw clenched. She raised her voice, steady, defiant. "Then stop hiding and fight me." Laughter echoed across the hangars. "Not yet, you're not ready." And then gunfire, explosions, more screams. By dawn, the base was in ruins, vehicles destroyed, comms silenced, 12 men dead, 20 more wounded. Kovacs' men had vanished into the desert, leaving nothing but ash and doubt. The soldiers gathered on the parade ground, faces hollow, uniforms stained with soot and blood. Harrove stood before them, his voice hoarse but strong. "We lost men tonight, but we are not broken. We stand, we fight, we endure." The words carried weight, but the men's eyes drifted again to Mack. Not because she was untouched, she wasn't. Smoke still clung to her hair, blood streaked her sleeve where she dragged a wounded private to safety. But because when everything had fractured, when fear had swallowed them, she had stood. Miller found her afterward, his voice low, almost reverent. "They listen to you now, more than him, more than me. You're the only one they'll follow." She shook her head. "I'm not here to lead them." Doesn't matter, Miller said quietly. You already are. That night, Mack sat alone in the ruined barracks, staring at the photo of her father again. The man who had carried his men through fire. The man who had died with his command intact. And for the first time, she admitted the truth to herself. She hadn't come to Fort Hawkins to hide. She hadn't even come to face her past. She had come to decide if she was willing to carry what her father once carried, to bear the weight of others, even if it broke her. Outside, the base was silent, smoldering. Soldiers lay awake, listening for footsteps that weren't there. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the wire, Kovac was watching, waiting. The next strike wouldn't be about fear. It would be about ending this. Why did the night feel like a held breath, as if the world itself was waiting for a decision to be made? Fort Hawkins hadn't healed from the last assault. Barracks still smelled of smoke. Vehicles still sat burned-out husks. Soldiers moved quieter now, shoulders hunched, rifles clutched like lifelines. They drilled because Mack pushed them. They stayed sharp because Harrove demanded it. But in their eyes, exhaustion warred with fear. And Kovac knew it. The letters returned, not slipped under doors this time, dropped from drones buzzing overhead at dawn, typed in English, Serbian, Arabic, the same message in every tongue. Stormbird cannot protect you. She can only bury you. Some soldiers crumpled them in rage. Others tucked them into pockets like curses they couldn't shake. Whispers rose again. Why fight for her? Why die for her ghosts? Miller tried to drown it out with drills, Thompson with grit, Harrove with speeches, but none of it held. The unit needed something more, something only Mack could give, and she knew it. She didn't want to, but war doesn't care what you want. The strike came on a moonless night. No alarms this time, no warning, just fire. Explosions tore through the west perimeter. Barracks windows shattered. Fuel tanks ignited in a roar that shook the earth. Soldiers scrambled half-dressed into boots and rifles as infiltrators poured through the breach, more than before, coordinated, relentless. Mack was already moving. She felt it coming. She grabbed her rifle, sprinted through the smoke, shouting orders before Harrove's voice hit the loudspeakers. Form lines, don't scatter with me. Her voice cut through panic like a blade. Soldiers rallied, forming a perimeter around the central yard. Fire lit their faces. Shadows danced at the edge of the floodlights. Then Kovac stepped into the open. Not a shadow now, not a whisper. A man, scar above his eye catching the glow, rifle slung casually as if he had all the time in the world. Stormbird, he called, voice low but carrying. At last. The soldiers froze. Some lifted rifles, hands trembling. Others stared, caught between fear and awe. Mack stepped forward, calm, steady. Her boots crunched on gravel. Her rifle hung at her side, but her posture was a weapon in itself. You wanted me, she said. Here I am. Kovac smiled faintly. You could have stayed hidden. You could have let your ghosts die with silence. But instead you come here, training children, pretending you're just another officer. He shook his head. You dishonor what you were. Her jaw tightened. No, I honor it by carrying it, by standing where others can't. His smile faded. Then let's finish what we started. He raised his rifle. The yard erupted in fire. Chaos swallowed the night. Soldiers shouted, ducking for cover. Bullets tore through smoke and flame. Kovac's men pressed from all sides, precision breaking against desperation. Mack moved through it steady as breath. Not reckless, not frantic, precise. Every shot she fired found its mark. Every command steadied the men around her. Where fear threatened to splinter them, her voice pulled them back. Hold the line. Watch your sectors. Trust the man beside you. Even Miller, voice raw with strain, followed her lead. And the soldiers, the same ones who had mocked her, doubted her, whispered about curses, now looked to her in the fire. But Kovac wasn't fatting. He moved through the chaos like a shadow, his shots deliberate, his men buying him time. Each time she caught sight of him, he slipped away. Each time she steadied her aim, he vanished. Until finally the fire thinned. The yard grew quieter. Smoke curled in the floodlight's glow. And she was alone. Kavek stood across from her, rifle lowered now. His men gone. Just the two of them in the ruined yard, fire flickering in broken windows around them. "You can't protect them," he said quietly. "You never could. Men died under your command, just like they'll die here. You think the ink on your skin makes you different. It makes you a curse." Her breath was steady, her heart was. She remembered her father's words. Strength isn't what you endure, it's what you protect. She raised her rifle. "Maybe you're right, maybe they will die, but not tonight, not because of you." They moved at the same time. His shot grazed her shoulder, hot pain ripping across flesh. Her round caught him clean in the chest. He staggered, dropped to his knees, blood blooming across black fabric. His rifle clattered against stone. Still he smiled, weak, bitter. "You can't kill a ghost, Stormbird." She stepped closer, her voice low, unshaking. "No, but you can silence one." His body slumped, his eyes dimmed, and just like that, the shadow that had haunted her was gone. The yard fell silent, smoke drifted, the last gunfire faded into the night. Soldiers emerged slowly, faces pale, uniforms scorched. They saw Kavek's body. They saw Mack standing over it, bleeding but unbroken. And for the first time, their silence wasn't fear. It was something heavier, respect. Harrow stepped forward, his face unreadable. For a long moment he just looked at her. Then he saluted, sharp, deliberate. One by one the soldiers followed. Miller last, his eyes steady on hers. No smirk, no doubt, just loyalty. She returned the salute, then let her arm fall. The battle was over, but wars never really end. That night, alone in her barracks, Mack sat on her bunk, bandage tight across her shoulder. The base was quiet now, save for the groan of generators and the soft voices of medics tending the wounded. She stared at the photo of her father again. For the first time, she didn't feel the shadow pressing down. She felt his presence beside her, silent, steady. Her tattoo burned faintly, not as a burden but as a reminder. A legacy not of ghosts but of choices. Because dignity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it doesn't even speak. Sometimes dignity simply stands and refuses to fall.